What is up, everybody? My name is Alex. I'm your host here on the Swole Friends podcast, as well as a co-founder and COO here at Swolverine. Swolverine is an endurance athlete and active lifestyle brand. We have over 31 different performance powders and daily health supplements that are all proprietary blend-free, clinically dosed, and scientifically proven effective. We also offer one-on-one nutrition coaching, training templates, online personal training, and a brand new service, which is one-on-one competitive fitness programming for our CrossFitters out there. I'd like to now welcome, though, our viewers and listeners to the Swole Friends podcast, episode 22, joined by our guest, Nick Iggy. Today, we are going to deep dive into building resilience, pursuing the extremes of mental and physical fitness. We'll talk about psychedelics, military service, mental health, and living life every day as if it were the greatest adventure of all. So Nick has served in the military. He entered into the military system when he was 18 years old. He served in the 82nd Airborne Division and the 2nd Ranger Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment for over 10 years. During that time, he was deployed 6 times to Afghanistan and the Middle East. He is now a full-time student at Harvard University studying neuroscience and striving to summit, which we will get into absolutely, summit the tallest mountain on each of the 7 continents. So Nick, what is going on? How are you today?
What up? No, good to be here. It's wild. We've been friends for so long. I feel like finally getting to catch up. It's awesome.
I know we haven't seen each other since I think before COVID, right? Maybe 4 years ago. I think we were working tequila shots in Washington.
I was about to say, I think the last time I saw you, we were on our patio doing tequila shots and having a good old time. It's wild how time flies, you know.
I know, and it's wild, and it's fun to, flash forward to sitting here with you now, especially knowing you personally and being able to be like, oh my gosh, you're a student at Harvard. What? How did we get here? And I don't know, being able to kind of share you with our community is super exciting.
So. I appreciate it's awesome beer. No, it always makes me laugh, especially there's like divides in my life, right? And being here at Harvard, I don't want to say like put on a facade or anything like that, but I definitely had to change the ways I acted, change my vocabulary, my behavior. I had to kind of redo myself in ways. And especially when we knew each other, I was like peak operational, still in the 75th Ranger Regiment, going to Afghanistan, kind of living a different lifestyle. And now we're here. You're in Reno. I'm in Boston going to school. It's like never thought this would be part of our interaction or conversation. So it's just life's cool. I'm just grateful to be here. Grateful to be able to do this with you.
Yeah, it's super fun. And funny story for everyone. One of the first times I met Iggy, I had actually cut my finger on some limes I just sliced a knife straight across my finger for all of the tequila shots at everyone's party. And I was like, oh, does anyone have a Band-Aid? My finger's bleeding. I think I sliced some of my nail. And you and all the boys go run to your rooms. And then all of you come out with like tourniquets and like and you're like, this is all we got. What are we going to do? And I was like, do you have any tape, I guess? Like maybe we just, I don't know. And you're like, is it going to fall off? And I was like, insane. So that kind of signified to me, and at that time, I didn't actually really understand how involved you were in the military, how technical and how specialized you were as a Ranger. And so I'm going to kind of segue that into you grew up in Hawaii, you moved to California, and then you're 18 and you're in the military. And tell me a little bit more about your origin story and some of our listeners out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from Hilo, Hawaii, kind of a small town on the Big Island of Hawaii. And it's one of those funny things is growing up there, I didn't really realize that it was like a quote unquote country or kind of rednecky style living. It's just Hawaii. And, we're on an island, we're kind of encapsulated by the ocean. So we're kind of stuck there. And I was very fortunate in the style that I grew up living. I got to grow up like kind of hunting, learn how to shoot guns and gun safety at a very young age. I would go fishing with my father, spear fishing. We would literally go out, gather food, gather fruit, all these things. Or we had friends that had these big gardens and would bring that all back. And my mom would cook it all, or she'd teach us how to cook. And it was this very, I feel like authentic would be a good word for it, or just kind of rural style living. And then I moved to LA when I was 10 years old. My father's really originally from the Los Angeles area. My mom's from Honolulu. Dad wanted to go to Hawaii to surf after high school. Met my mom. Just kind of followed in his footsteps a little bit. met my mom in Hawaii, became a pastor, had my sister and myself. So as we got older, he wanted to get us to LA, get out of Hawaii a bit, and give us some more exposure to the mainland. When I was in the 5th grade, showed up to the first day in school, and I was wearing what we call in Hawaii like a bodo bodo t-shirt, like just kind of a raggedy, hand-me-down, dirty t-shirt, board shorts, and flip-flops. And all these kids were in uniforms. That was like the thing. Even in public school, they all wore uniforms. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And my pigeon was terrible. Like if you guys thought I had like a bad vernacular nowadays, like when I was a kid, it might as well just been just rubbish. I could barely speak English. And I remember these kids were making fun of me, and I just like day 0 in school, just like, what? So we like shoved this kid, and like we started getting a little fight. And that was my first exposure to just a different way of thinking on the mainland than in Hawaii. Because in Hawaii, especially in the kind of public school system, getting in a scrap as a kid was kind of normal. It wasn't that big of a deal. And then in California, in the public school system, especially where I was growing up in the West Covina area, it very much became a big deal. And I was like, holy cow, this is so different. This is an interesting way of living. But yeah, so then I did that, grew up in the Los Angeles area, kind of got into the degenerate street kid Los Angeles life a little bit. Started hanging around with like tagging crews and I was very fortunate that I got to play sports all 4 years. I wrestled and swam, snowboarding, surfing, skating, just kind of doing like the Southern California thing, but never really took school too seriously. And when I ended up graduating high school, I wasn't in the best academic standing, and I didn't really have much discipline at the time. And I didn't realize, I didn't realize at the time that I hadn't set myself up for future or for success at all. So the decision to join the Army or the military, it was this very interesting nexus of a lot of things. It was like, my family was very patriotic growing up. We were always taught, love America. America's a really good place. We stand for freedoms. We stand for these really good ideologies. Always respect first responders, police officers, firefighters, etc. And, I'm 30. So I was during the time of the war. Like I saw the towers fall. I saw the invasion of Iraq. I saw the invasion of Afghanistan. It was on the news cycle very often. And I kind of always had this desire to join the military ever since I was a kid. So it was this really interesting convergence of so many different emotions and ideologies and thoughts that came together. And ultimately the idea of adventure just became like too much to bear. Just like, oh, I want to do this, and I often think how different my life would be if I didn't, right? Like maybe if I didn't do drugs and just go surf and snowboard all the time.
Isn't that what you do now? No.
It's a circle, man. I went full circle. This time in college, though. This time actually doing my homework. Yeah, trying to at least. Yeah, so I think often, like, if I didn't do a very roundabout path into the military, like, would I be here at Harvard studying neuroscience, or would I be doing something else that I'm, like, I'd say I'm pretty fulfilled and pretty happy right now, but would I be on a different path that I didn't come this way? And it just keeps me up, and not just keep me up at night, but it's something I think about often. I kind of chew on the idea a lot,
Yeah. Well, you committed a lot of your time, 10 years into the service. You lived a lot of life and did a lot of things during that time. And so it's almost like a past life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like you've transitioned to something so different that it's, hindsight's always 2020, but kind of looking back and seeing, well, how has that affected me, right? Positively and negatively. How has that shaped me into who I am, the man that you are? And what can you bring forward, right? And was there a time, I guess, when you entered into the military system when you're like, oh, fuck, what did I do? Like, what did that happen? Or were you just like, balls of wall charging and you're just like, bring it on, world. I'm Nick. You're going to meet me. I'm going to know you.
Yeah. It didn't actually happen until later on in my first deployment. So, I was very fortunate that I did play varsity sports all 4 years of high school, or, the last 3 years, but I played sports all 4 years. Mm-hmm. And I was on the wrestling team, and just the nature of wrestling is kind of intense. And, you have to cut weight, and the environment of it is, in my opinion, it's probably one of the best high school sports, or at least best common high school sport that most people have access to, because of the things it teaches you, like discipline and how to fight through things and how to be tired and hungry and thirsty and all the things that come with that. And also, you're feeling like, dude, I think my coach actually hates me. He's like telling me not to eat, and I have to run around the room with
For this
trash
trash bag.
bags and sweats, and you're just like, oh my God, I want to die. So when I got to basic training, I was like, this is kind of it. Yeah, this is still, this is in 2011. Like, this wasn't Full Metal Jacket getting choked out by the drill sergeant basic training, but it was still relatively intense. Like, my generation of drill instructors were part of the invasion of Iraq, part of the invasion of Afghanistan. So, like, hardcore combat proven dudes. I joined the infantry. And when I showed up, I had this idea in my head. It was going to be like Full Metal Jacket or something insane. And it wasn't that bad. And I think it wasn't that bad because I had the context of wrestling beforehand. So when I showed up, they're hazing the shit out of us, they're smoking us, screaming, doing the dealio. I was kind of like, oh, I know what this is. Like, I've been here before. Remember
Do it
one?
again.
Yeah, like, this spit on me, call me dirty, like that,
Gosh.
Um,
Ladies, no.
Yeah, it was funny. I remember specifically one day they were smoking us, and they pulled the dryers off the wall and they turned it all up. And we had done something egregious, like someone didn't have a sock rolled properly in the back of their locker or something crazy. So there's like, no, we're just gonna torment you forever. Remember, they locked us in the laundry room, pulled the dryers off the wall, and they're like, we're not leaving till the fucking walls are crying, right? And they just like made us do burpees and all kinds of dumb stuff.
Yeah.
And it was funny because in that moment, I could look around the room that we were getting hazed in, and I could see the other wrestlers, and we're all just kind of smiling at each other, like, "Oh, dude, we've all been here before. I know exactly what's going on." Because there would be wrestling practices where they're like, "Hey, we're not leaving until the ceiling's dripping, and we just have to be in there drilling, doing our thing." So that was more or less kind of fun. And then I got to like blow, shoot guns and drop bombs and do all the fun stuff that you do in basic training. From there, went to airborne school, which was a good time. They just taught you how to jump out of airplanes. And again, with my buddies, like, hey man, this is cool. Free food, go to the gym, jump out of airplanes. Like, this ain't terrible. And it wasn't until I actually got to Afghanistan. After airborne school, I went straight to my unit, 82nd Airborne Division, 1505 Parachute Infantry Regiment. And then I got sent straight to Afghanistan to meet my team or my platoon up, and they were attached to a special forces team. We were their uplift guys. And we showed up to Mazar Sharif up north, hopped in with the team and convoy like 20 hours further north, and this just drops us off in a field pretty much in our gun trucks and all those things. And they're like, all right, dudes, start digging. Like, this is camp. Like, I'm like day zero in the Army. I'm the newest guy. I'm the youngest guy. Everybody obviously hates me. I'm just like, well, I'm just terrified. Like, what the shit? Like, Sergeant, there's no buildings. He's like, yeah, there's no buildings. Start digging a hole so we can make them, dude. I was like, oh my God. And that for me was kind of the beginning of like, oh my God, this is like real now.
Yeah.
Because before that, it was just kind of plain Army. And then, yeah, we're out there. And then I remember we're digging these firing positions. By then we were unloading some of our gear and all that stuff. And it's the summer of Afghanistan. It's like June. And I remember I'm digging this hole, and it was so hot, the Coke cans started to explode, started to pop, 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 pop. And dude, day zero Iggy, I'm just like, contact. I just scream contact and like dive into this position we're going. I'm like scrambling around, like looking for my rifle, like, contact, does anybody see anything? And then my platoon sergeant walks over and just kicks some dirt on me. He goes, hey, pussy, it's just the Coke cans exploding. And then that was like my first impression with everyone was like, these Coke cans explode. I lose my shit. I scream and jump into a hole that we just dug. And I was like, oh my God, like, what have I done? That was probably my first, oh shit moment. This is for realsies.
Yeah. Wow. At least you didn't pee yourself, Yeah. I mean, it could have been a lot worse. So, but it probably would have evaporated before anything happened.
It was hot.
You probably did. But yeah, I mean, that's some real stuff though. And it's like, and from there, I mean, you went back 5 more times. You've seen a lot of things. I mean, you came back, so things have been successful, but not everyone has come back with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's always interesting, right? Talking about the military experience, and especially in the combat arms or in the special operations community. And one of the things I chewed on a lot over the few years that I've been out was like how to deal with it, right? Is there survivor's guilt? What's this? What's that? And it's interesting because now that I'm here at school, like I said, I'm 30 years old. I've had all these past experiences, and I get to see I'm like reintegrated again with a very young demographic from our society. Granted, albeit it's Harvard and kind of a different thing, but still, 18 to 20-year-old kids. And seeing how they deal with like death holistically is very interesting, right? Because the context in which they're introduced to people dying, especially whether they know them or not, or just holistically, the idea of death is very weird because for my military experience, the first time we lost a dude was actually at airborne school, I think. A kid had committed suicide on the way in, like right after we graduated basic training. Like he went home and committed suicide. And I was like, holy shit, like this is real. Like this is for realsies.
Mhm.
And then I had a buddy shortly after airborne school. When I think right when I got to Afghanistan, he was still stateside and he committed suicide as well. So like very onset in the early onset of my military career, we started losing guys. And that was my introduction to like, holy cow, this is the reality of this job. So I was, 18, 19 years old. And within less than a year of being in the Army, two of my friends are already gone. So it set this interesting precedence that kind of set the template for my career as I went forward and kind of set the relationship with death. And that, it's changed over time and how I perceive death. And when I was in the military, it was this very interesting uh, ideology or way of looking at it. And I probably bought into it way too hard. Was this like die a warrior's death, like die a good death, die in battle, till Valhalla and all that crazy stuff.
Mhm.
And when I was in and still operational and doing the things, the idea of dying never really scared me, right? It was very much like, hey, if I'm gonna die, I want to die doing something fucking cool, right? So like, if it's not combat related, like I hope it's just something dope that I'm doing. If that's how I go out, right? You don't want to like trip and fall and like smack your head on a curb and you're like, damn, that's how we went out, dude, right? Like, I want to be like, whoa,
I bet.
you jumped out of a plane naked on fire, like goddamn, like what do you
Where's Nick?
yeah, right. Like,
R.I.P. man.
right. So the idea then was like I wanted to die doing something cool if it wasn't going to be in combat. And then if it was in combat, the way I looked at it, at least personally, was this is just kind of part of the job. And it may have been ignorance on my end, but I actually never really felt like I was going to die.
Mhm.
And by no means I was, there's plenty of dudes who did way more intense stuff than I've ever been through or could ever imagine going through. But for the things that I went through and the gunfights that I've been in, it was always just kind of fun, to be honest. And again, this isn't to glorify wars, this isn't to glorify combat or anything like that. It's just I had fun. I was with my friends, and you've met. That's how we met. We met through my mutual military friends, and at the end of the day, they're a hoot. They're
Yeah.
good, fun guys to be around.
They're some of the most fun people I've ever met in my life.
Ridiculous. Those goofy dudes ever.
Yeah.
Like for our mutual friend, Omi. Like one of my favorite stories of this dude. I'm sure you've probably heard it before, but it's 2017. We're actioning a target, a bunch of bad dudes being bad dudes and what have you, and we ended up having to just like sorry, it always makes me laugh thinking about it because it's so on par. It's such so on him, and it makes me laugh of like the level. Like this guy is a way better ranger than I've ever been, and he's a more solid dude than I could ever be. But yet, like the level of goofiness, and I think that speaks to professionalism and how good we train and how we are at our job. But we're going after these bad dudes. The gunfight ensues. We're in there, we're throwing grenades at each other, doing the dealio. We ended up we couldn't get as far into the house as we wanted to do, so we have to do what's called a wall breach. We blow a big old hole in the side of the wall. So he's like, hey, I'm going to put a wall breach up. I go with him, pulling security. We go back, and we're hiding behind this like little wall thing, and you got to kind of watch the charge, make sure nothing happens on it. And we're turning, we're like, hey, man, how hot's that charge? He just smiles. He goes, fucking hot, dude. And he's like, I have control. And then he blows it. And then before I could get my head under the wall, like the concussive blast kind of hit me. I just remember like, oh my God, like, like, I just got smacked in the face by this explosion. And he's like, on me. And he like hops over this wall and runs down the alleyway. And I'm like trying to chase this dude. And, he's a damn near Sasquatch size of a human and he can move fast. So he runs down there and he like gets in there quick. He clears. He's like, "Hey, we're all good, man." I just remember like leaning on the wall and be like, "Huh?"
Are we though?
Yeah, yeah, hushing.
Hermit.
Yeah, yeah. He's smiling. He's like, "Oh, dude, we're good, man. We're having a good time." Night goes on. We ended up having to go back inside that house and re-engage these guys in there. We have our own little actions happen inside the house. What ultimately ends up happening is one of the last bad guys alive throws a grenade at us while we're all there. Grenade goes boom and hits most of us. I think actually hit all of us. I ended up getting out of a window and then I came back in to help grab these dudes. Anyway, our buddy Omi was one of the dudes that was hit. So I mean, he's walking at this time. He's good to go. He's on the door banging, doing his dealio. So we get out and I was like, "Hey man, you're bleeding. Like, I'm gonna check you out, do some stuff on you." So we get him on the ground. We're cutting him open and we're doing our blood sweeps looking for him, and he's got blood coming out all four of his extremities. Like, "Oh damn, dude." So I'm like, "Hey buddy, it's gonna hurt." It's our this guy. He's just talking. He's making jokes the entire time. He's trying to keep me in good spirits. And I was like, "Dude, you have shrapnel in all four of your limbs. You have shrapnel and you're bleeding out of him." He's cracking jokes, having a good time. So I'm trying to put tourniquets on this guy. And part of the process, you have to take everything out of their pockets because you got to get a secure fit when you're putting it on. Pull out of his pocket, he has a Chewbacca mask, like a full over your face Chewbacca mask. Rez is like, "What the fuck? All right, whatever. You put that on the side. We're doing our deal." There's still actions happening around us. Like, that dude's still alive. Like, there's things going on the subjective still.
Yeah.
We're working. Our first sergeant comes up, checking on us. He's like, "Iggy, how you doing?" I was like, "Hey, I'm good. Da 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 da." He's like, "How's Omi doing?" He's like, "Dude, he's good. We're working on him." He's like, "Yo, what the fuck is this?" And he holds up a Chewbacca mask. This dude grabs it, throws it on in the middle. There's like,
oh my gosh,
like stuff going on. And he's like, "You never know when you need to question someone." He goes, I was like, "Oh my God, this guy's insane." So I got to do some of the wildest things you can do in combat with amazing dudes like that who, in the most extreme and dire of circumstances can find something fun, find a way to keep everyone's spirits up and have a good time doing it all. So back to the original question about like death and all that stuff. It's very weird because we wanted to be there. We wanted to go to combat. That was what we did. Like Rangers, we're the world's premier direct action raid force. What we do is kill, capture high value targets. And we want to go do those things. We train for that all year. I mean, every time we go deploy somewhere, that's all we want to do. But it's an interesting, I'm probably saying that way too much. I'm sorry. That's like my crutch word. Part of that is by wanting to go do those things, selfishly, I want to go fight these dudes. That means I have to put my best friends' lives at risk, and granted, they want to be there as well. But it's this really, it's a weird thing to deal with or really kind of like think about at the time of like, hey, I want to go into the gnarliest targets ever and go fight the baddest dudes. I want all my friends to be there. But, you never want your friends to die, right? You never want bad things to happen with them. You just want to go do rad shit with your friends. Mm-hmm. And that during that time was kind of my relationship with death was like, hey, if we're going to do it, we're going to die like a warrior's death. We're going to do it live. I had a drill sergeant when I was in basic training who had a tattoo across his forearm that said "pussies die of natural causes." And that was, I mean, imagine meeting that guy for the first time and be like, making great life decisions, no regrets.
Nice to meet you, Craig.
yeah, exactly. So that's how death was initially introduced to us in the very beginning, and obviously over time that's changed, and I've used that perspective to move on to other things, but it was wild, man.
Yes, it was. So 6 tours. What was your favorite tour?
Oh, that's interesting. I'd probably say that tour and my very last tour. Okay. Probably my two favorites. That tour specifically because I was very fortunate to be part of different programs that allowed me to do different things on the battlefield. So generally the way it goes when you persecute a target is there's the find, the fix, and the finish aspect of it all. Because you got to find the bad guy, figure out exactly, and like fix them as in like, hey, this is where he's at, this is what they're doing, yada, yada, yada. And then the finish force, which is go get him. That deployment, due to some of the things I was involved with within the special operations community, I was able to do pretty much all three, not massively all three, but I had parts in all three. And that story I just told was part of a finished project for something we kind of had been holistically working on as a joint task force unit. So getting to do those things multiple times over and over was just super cool. Also, I got to, grow out my beard, or quote unquote beard. It looks terrible. It looks so bad. I look like the bad guy from Big Trouble Little China. This long wispy beard. It was absolutely absurd.
I took some hair and put it around my face. Yeah. To work one day. This is Nick.
Yeah. Dude, you know what's funny about that is my beard was so bad. After we got out of the hospital, I remember I went to the mail room to get like all the mail that I had collected up. And I wasn't in the hospital for a very long time by any means. But I went in there to get it, and I saw one of my old buddies there. And he's like, damn, bro, what happened? The grenade blew off all the good parts of your beard? Oh, no. Oh, that was like minus 36 hours ago. You know what I mean?
Oh, man. Yeah. I thought about putting that photo up on like the cover of this. But then I was like, we'll save it. We'll save everyone's eyes from Nick's horrible beard. So
I appreciate it. It's funny. It's hard. I'm saying all this like Till Valhalla, warrior's death, and you imagine like big burly bearded guys instead of like a dirty Fu Manchu and like Joe Dirt mutton chops.
That's all right. Every team needs a little bit of something, right?
We need one.
Did you ever get hurt?
Yeah. That grenade hit me, broke this hand, broke this wrist, spotted my elbow, spotted my knee, spotted my ribs, perforated eardrum, stuff like that.
Okay.
I just think at that time I was too hyped up on adrenaline, or it's too dumb to know it that I'd been hit, really.
Oh.
Yeah, just shenanigans. Yeah. It's one of those, it's one of those things where, there's guys that were hit way worse than I was. And, one of the Rangers there, then he ended up dying for a little while, and they brought him back to life. And, I credit this guy to this day that if it wasn't for him, if he didn't take the majority of that blast, like a lot of us would have been very, very worse off. But, kind of part of the job. It's such a weird, I was reminiscent on it. It was such a weird, cool job. And again, not to glorify war, violence, or anything like that, but just there's so many interesting things that you got to do and have so many different experiences, that you're like, wow, am I getting paid to do this right now? And like one of them was that deployment. There's a mission that we had to do where I would dress up as an Afghani, go undercover in Kabul city with just a car full, like, 4 dudes in just a slick, like Toyota Corolla, just a normal ass car, no armor, nothing. And we go hunt dudes down and we go look for bad guys. And that was part of the find and fix part of the mission. And we just cruise around looking for dudes. And if shit popped off, it was just like us, and that kind of independence and the ability to do those wild things I was like, dude, we're in a traffic jam in Kabul city, right? Like the capital of Afghanistan. Like we're in a roundabout. We're in the Iron Circle. It's this ring of roundabouts, and there's a donkey going the opposite way of traffic as we're trying to go one way, and it's causing a massive 3-hour traffic jam. And I'm sitting there undercover, man jams, body armor, the whole dealio, little hat. I have a submachine gun and a rifle kind of tucked up here in the side. I'm like, dude, what is life right now? Like, are we really in Kabul going against the flow of traffic because of a donkey cart? But that deployment for me, yeah.
I'm sure people listening to this are probably like tripping the way I am, because I'm just like trying to put myself into that. And of course, like me being, me, I'm like, how is it?
Yeah.
It's a trip though. I mean, you paint a really good picture. You do a good job explaining things. You know what I mean? Because like I'm sitting here and I'm like, yeah, I'm looking at the donkey too. And then I look around my office with a microphone in my face. Like, cool.
No, I think you have to, right? I'm very open here at school, and I try not at school here. I try not to be too vulgar or too out there with that. However, my personality is that I'm just kind of an outgoing and loud fella.
Mm-hmm.
So,
no. Doesn't even take a few shots. Loud. Always here.
Yeah. It's like I try to balance those two things, and some people here will say I probably do it well, and others be like, "Ooh, he does it terribly." But life's a process, and you gotta do what you can to revise it. So that deployment was really cool for me because of those experiences and the lessons I got to take home, as well as the dudes I have to work with. At the end of the day, it's always about the tribe. It's always about the people around you. And I had probably some of the best leaders in my opinion, that I've ever worked with in the military there. And they showed me these extreme examples of how to lead people, how to lead by an example, and how to take care of your dudes. And I'd say, like, that's probably one of the reasons I have such fond experiences of the military. Is, don't get me wrong, I definitely work for pieces of shit. And yeah, those guys are those guys. But I did have a overwhelmingly large amount of good and amazing leaders that show me these great examples of what it means to, like, take care of the dudes, to really, like, give a shit about them. And one of those leaders was there on that deployment, and I was very fortunate that I got to experience that with him and kind of see how he worked. And there was highs and there was lows, man. But seeing how he always rallied the troops and was always trying to put on a positive image for the guys, even though we know that he's in a bad spot, was amazing. And a lot of lessons learned from that. And again, it's lessons learned looking back at it. I wish I had a tight enough feedback loop there that I could, like, see it synthesize and be like, all right, this is how I be a leader. Instead, it's like, oh, that was cool. I'm glad I got to experience that, fuck up a million times. And then 8 years later, be like, oh, that's the thing they're talking about. Maybe I'll implement that now.
Yeah, isn't that the fun part of life?
No, yeah, it's part of living. But my second favorite one was my very last deployment, my 2019 to 2020 deployment, mainly because kind of two big factors there. One, I was very fortunate that I got to be part of creating, we'll just nickname it the Tactical Robotics Unit within my organization. And, we utilized drones or sea cars and things like that. We were the first guys in our organization up there in Washington to create a program like that, gather everything, create the training program, create the lines of funding, and then go and implement that on the battlefield. And in 2019, I got to be the first dude in my unit to actually take those devices out and kind of field test them in live combat. And that was something I'm very proud of to this day, and something that allowed me to come here through that experience, through creating that program. I got to brief President Trump when he came to Afghanistan to visit the troops, and a handful of other kind of executive level people and officers at that time. And obviously that instance in itself, when I put that on my resume, even though I was doing drugs and not going to school in high school, shows some kind of upward trajectory or growth or something that Harvard liked. And it's kind of like a sob story in a way. And that allowed me, I credit that highly to me, but to come to Harvard and do what I'm doing here. But even that program in itself, that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the dudes around me. I had an amazing commanding officer, I had an amazing executive officer. My PL, my lieutenant above me, super amazing guy. The dude I co-started with, like, I wouldn't have been able to do without leaning on him. I'm damn near illiterate. Like, the fact that I'm cussing as little as I am now is, proves that there's a God somewhere.
Or that you've been in school long enough.
yeah, or that I'm scared of getting canceled.
Oh man.
But yeah, they all helped tremendously and paved the way and allowed me to do the things that I did that, ultimately ended up here at Harvard. And also we got some super fun missions then on that deployment. And that deployment for me was a lot of cool things happened. I was there when Bagram got attacked by the suicide bombers and all the fun stuff that happened ensuing there. I got to go on some pretty cool missions. We were in this valley, went through this super gnarly ambush. That was pretty fun. And, even in moments like that, you can find comedy. You can find these things to be happy and smile about, and like, oh, cool. That was, learn these lessons. And, I think I learned a lot that on that deployment that I actually did kind of rapidly implement in my life. On how to take things seriously, when not to take things seriously, and make these judgment calls. As well as I was very introspective and noticed a lot about myself. And one of those things I noticed about myself was, man, I was not mentally healthy. I was not in a good place. I got a little too violent, and the way I viewed humans, the way I viewed humanity was not positive. I very much viewed humans at this time. This is my sixth deployment, done the thing once or twice at this point, and I just viewed humans as things that I could just dispose of. Like, you know, shooting a dude didn't mean anything to me anymore. It was very normal, very natural. I remember during a gunfight, I checked my heart rate. I was like, oh, interesting. And like kept getting in this gunfight, right? Like it didn't really, it'd been so many that it just kind of was like, it was normal, And one of the things I chew on a lot was that just, I'm a professional in my craft. And I'm so used to this thing that I can think of other things and have these other thoughts instead of being all consumed by it. Or am I in an unhealthy spot? And I think it was a very good mixture of both. Like, for example, I'm going to leave his name out of it, but I was with my buddy at the time. Two examples of this. I was with him a lot during this deployment, and the guys ambushing us were on this ridge line. They're shooting machine gun strafing fire down at us, and we're kind of behind this little defilade hiding out. And there was a group of dudes kind of bunched up on our side. And I was like, yo, bro, go tell those dudes to spread out. And he's like, roger that. And just turns his head and he goes, hey, spread the fuck out, at the top of his lungs. And I was like, dog, I could have done that. Like, I'm right next to you. If I wanted to yell spread out, I could have just yelled spread the fuck out, dude. Like, you're a Ranger E5. Go over there, spread them out, give them their, all the things they need to do. Back, my radio dies at that moment. We've been on this mission for a long time. I was like, hey, man, I need you to swap the batteries on my radio. And to his credit, this is his first major gunfight. And he's like, are you insane? They're shooting at us right now. Like, how do you want to, like, change your batteries? And I was like, dude, chill. Look at those tracer rounds. And these tracer rounds are just kind of like lackadaisically kind of going all over the place. And, there's other people doing stuff, and we're calling up air support and the whole deal. The mission's going on. But, the tracer rounds just kind of falling all around. There's a handful of RPGs just kind of like, no, nothing specific, just kind of landing places. I was like, bro, you see that? That means they don't know where we're at. That means they're looking for us. And if they're looking for us, the only way for them to find us is if we shoot back. So therefore, we're good, dude. And he's just like,
big batteries.
Yeah, dude. So he's like, no, you're insane. I was like, dude, we would have changed the batteries by now. And we would have been able to keep working if you just did what I asked you to do. So things like that. And, it's those moments like that where you realize you're like, oh man, like, do I really understand the battlefield, or am I just numb? I mean, that allowed me to do a lot of thinking as I was getting out. And one of the reasons why I ultimately transitioned out of the military was I was probably numb and in a very bad mental place. And I think it was getting to the point where I was almost negatively impacting the organization. Even though I was doing this drone stuff and all this other things, I think my mentality was negative, and I was no longer being the asset that I could be. And I think I was kind of starting to become a liability to the organization, which ultimately ended up in me leaving and being like, hey, I should probably get out of the Army, man, and like take a little reprieve and figure some stuff out and try and do something new. And that kind of began the journey on my way out, and which ultimately ended up here at Harvard.
Yeah. And that's like about the time we met. And it's funny because it's not funny. Everyone's a little bit different in what we talk about in our lives. It doesn't take someone to have to be in the military to want to or not want to talk about things. Everyone kind of has this choice to how we present ourselves to others and what we let others know, or how vulnerable we are or aren't, or what parts of our stories we want people to know or we want to keep in the shadows. And when I met you, it was such a quick, you were so transparent, and you were in that state of flux, right? I mean, I think and you guys, like, we all partied pretty hard. Like, I'm not gonna sugarcoat that one. I lived in Washington. We were all homies. We would have like 20 people over at the house. We all CrossFitted. We would go work out super hard. You guys had this like, house of 5 dudes that looked over I don't remember what the body was. Yeah, Puget Sound, you guys. And we're watching like sunsets, barbecue, and it's a good time. So we're all just hanging, and you just were so transparent. And I was like, well, what do you do? And you didn't tell me exactly what you do. You were like, I just do what these guys do. But then you were like, but I'm in this weird position in life. And I was like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like, okay. And you were like, I'm really questioning a lot of the things. And if, my responsibility to these people is healthy, and if my responsibility to myself is being respected, and if I'm taking care of myself or not. And I remember you went and sat out just kind of like by yourself um, at the side door, and everyone's kind of like, well, Nick's just doing Nick. You know what I mean? And it kind of like stuck with me in a weird way where I was just like, this guy's a thinker. This guy, he's got a lot of shit in his head. I'm not going to pry, but, there's a lot of hearing a little bit more about your story and how you've tapped into cognitive reframing, how you've tapped into attitude, how you've tapped into human nature, survival. You talk about doing a job and being professional and approaching it that way, but you also are willing to like recognize the dehumanization aspect of it. And that was something that we talked about that day. And you were very straightforward about it, and you were like, well, it's just, it's not really a person anymore. And I just need to ask myself some questions. And then I was like, well, maybe he's outside asking himself some questions. We'll see him later, I mean, it's kind of a lot. And, but it's interesting how throughout your time you were able to self-reflect, check in, move on, self-reflect, check in, move on. Right. It wasn't, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't just this like charge hard, see you in 10 years.
Mhm.
Oh, where did the last 10 years of my life go? And I would assume that's kind of what has piqued your interest into neuroscience, into the way the mind works, which also has tapped you back into something that you got into in high school, right? Which is now part of life, and psychedelics and how that affects PTSD and the way our brain works through trauma, whether it's military or not. So tell me a little bit more about that and how that's affected you into your studies at such an astute, recognized schooling experience.
Yeah, no, dude. Yeah, they kind of like, it's funny. You can kind of look at my life nowadays if I was like segmenting chapters. Yeah, like right when we met, you're absolutely. It was a weird time in my life. I think had I done my first ayahuasca experience then? Do you remember?
I think it was like right after.
Okay.
It was like
Yeah.
that was something we talked. We talked about drugs. We we like you had to go grab like something out of your room, and I was like da da da, and like I think one of the girls was with us something, and then I was like, holy shit, this guy's got a drawers full of sex toys. I'm going the other way, and and then you're like, no, it's just this is life. These are normal things, and I'm like the sheltered person where I approach the world with this horribly naive thing that I'm working on, but I was like, oh, I gotta go. And you're just like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, I don't know.
Forgot that I had that whole thing of sex toys.
Yeah.
Oh, it makes me laugh.
I don't know what room I just walked into, but I'm gonna walk back out. I was like, girls.
A sex toy? Is that a gun? Are those surfboards? Yeah,
Literally what just happened. I was like, this guy's into all kinds of weird shit. And you're just like, yes, I am. I also am very weird in life. And I'm like, okay, all right. Here we are 4 years later on a professional podcast.
Yep. Yeah. Life's weird, man. Life's super weird. Yeah.
There's no history here for anyone who's like really put a thing on that. I'm just like, this is the thing with Nick, is it Nick's a very transparent person, and it's just that what makes you unique, but
I appreciate that. Truly do. Yeah. So when I got out of the military, kind of like I was saying, I knew I was in this weird spot. One of the last dudes I ever killed, I shot like 15 times in the back of the head, damn near point blank with my pistol. He was crawling away. And then I transitioned my rifle, shot this other dude. And I remember as we were clearing the bodies, I grabbed his prayer beads and I was like, fuck your God. And I spit on him. Right. And this wasn't like I'm, for anybody listening who's me like, oh my God. I'm not anti-Muslim or anti-Islam or anything like that. By any means. I just, don't really like asshole extremists that try and kill other people. But nonetheless, I digress.
I think you're also painting the picture of like kind of what I just tried to explain, like where you're at in life, right? Yeah. It was a very intense time.
Yeah, it was interesting. But that's one of the things that drove the nail in the coffin for me, where I realized I was like, oh man, like I really don't care like who these dudes are or what have you. And I think with our personality type, if you're gonna do something, you might as well go all the way. So I began looking at therapy. I've always been kind of journaling over the years. I just thought it was a cool thing to do and kind of document the deployments and where my head was at and things that come with that. But I was big into hot yoga. I was getting big into meditation. I started doing therapy, started consistently journaling at that time. And I was kind of dedicated on this idea of like, hey man, like we're getting out of the army to heal. Let's fucking heal, bro. Like let's go all in on this. If we're doing it, we're doing it live. Um, and through that journey of trying to figure this out, especially in the first few months of getting out of the military, um, you just realize yoga's cool, but I was kind of just there for the chicks. Um, like meditation's cool, but like, I don't know if I'm really getting much out of this at the time. Therapy's cool, but I can just lie to this dude, right? Like I don't have any qualms lying to this fella.
It's such a
And yeah, and journaling was cool as well, but at the same time, like I could just I knew I was protecting my ego by not being truthful with myself at the time when I was journaling. And so I was like, hey man, none of this shit's really working. And when you get out, you're like, hey, I'm going to change. And it's obviously not a flip switch. And for anybody who listens to this who's here at the school with me is like, damn, has he even changed at all? But it's a very long, gradual process. And I wanted to do it as fast as I could. And again, kind of an extreme personality. And I heard I think it was on Joe Rogan, talking about how ayahuasca will help veterans and help students with PTSD and all that stuff. And I don't think I have PTSD in the traditional sense of like I hear a firework, I'm like, like I I enjoyed my time in gunfights. I think explosions are cool as shit.
It's
Um,
just the Coke cans. So load a Coke can here, baby.
yeah, if I see another Coke can, dude, I'm hitting the deck.
I'm out.
Yeah.
It's like the cucumber and the cat, have you seen it? Like, oh, it's cucumber.
Yeah.
All right.
I have a tray of stuff. I'll just toss it. But yeah, it was for me. It was an emotional thing. It was more of an empathy type of PTSD. It was kind of like keep harboring on it, but it was just learning how to accept people, not being so judgmental of them. And I was in special operations. So I had to go through a selection process. I objectively prove that I'm better than other people, especially within the military. And it fed my ego to an extreme. And that's not a good place to be. And nor is it a thing to be like, I'm better than you because I'm in special operations. It's like, no, everybody has their job. Everybody has a thing that they do. And this whole military community would not be able to function if people didn't do their jobs. Being in the Rangers, I just had my job and it was a different job. And I got there because of the things I did in my life. And other people are doing whatever they do because of the same reasons, right? And it took me a long time to realize that. And I knew how to get past all this stuff. So then I heard about this ayahuasca thing, and again, the full send personality was like, all right, fuck it, dude. I'll buy a ticket to Peru right now and just kind of send them my way and just show up in Peru and be like, y'all doing drugs? What's up? I heard this is good for me. And obviously, a lot of my friends thought that was an idiotic idea. And I was actually with a lot of these guys on a snowboarding trip in Whistler. And we're talking with a mutual friend after we're done snowboarding for the day, telling him like, hey, yeah, I think I'm going to buy a ticket here and go to Peru. And I told him the story, and he was like, no, don't do that. That's dumb. I was like, well, man, like, what am I going to do? And he's like, hey, check it out, bro. I got invited to a veteran ayahuasca ceremony. You need it more than I do. I'll give you my spot. All I had to do was interview with the guy who was running it at the time or facilitating it and, just make sure everything was kosher. And then, it went well. And he brought me into my first ayahuasca ceremony. And that was the catalyst that kind of began the real big change for me. It was a 2-day ceremony. Amazing shaman. Him and his wife were just really great people. But in the first night when we kicked off the ceremony, it was just terror. In the bottom of my gut, I just could feel this knot of fear and anxiety and just like, oh no. And I felt sick. And I felt like I had this lead blanket on me and I couldn't purge, so I couldn't throw up and I couldn't get the stuff out of me. I remember feeling sick for like all night, fell asleep. The next morning I woke up and was like, what the shit was that, dude? We have the small group meeting and everybody's telling about this magical story. Like, I met Jesus and Jesus took me back through all my ancestors and I was able to work through XYZ and oh, it was beautiful. And I got filled with love and all this other shit. And I was like, what the fuck, dude? I was like, what? I was like, dude, I had 8 hours of terror. I was freaking the fuck out, man. And there's like, it was just different. I had an entirely wild experience or just different experience than all these other people. And, when we got ready for night 2, the shaman pulled me aside and was like, hey, man, I'm paraphrasing. This guy doesn't talk like a surfer. Yeah, what's up, bruh?
That sucked.
Sorry. Yeah. But he was like, hey man, are you good? And I was like, yeah, I think so, man. He's like, hey, just want to let you know, this is your journey, bro. Like, you don't have to go in there. I just remember telling him, like, hey, man, I told you I want to come here and stare the devil in the eye. Let's go meet the fucking devil. I said that with bravado. Dude, I was terrified. I was freaking the fuck out. I was like, oh my God. Like, I don't know if I can handle another night like that. It was terrible.
Yeah.
So we kick off night 2. And, we drink the ayahuasca. We lay down. They open the ceremony. The meditations start happening. And I just felt the onset again. This, like, disgusting fear, burning pit in my gut. And I was like, oh no, not again, dude. And then the shaman's wife came over me and she started chanting and praying over me and blowing jungle tobacco smoke on me, which is a lot of healing properties and stuff. And as that started happening, I could feel this like thumping in my temples and a thumping in my third eye, or where my third eye would be. And as she kept chanting and blowing smoke and it got more intense, it felt like something was pulling a line out of my forehead. And as that line was being pulled up, it felt like it was dredging out this toxic, terrible things I could feel in my toes, came through my whole body until finally it came and like exploded out of my third eye, or metaphorically, it felt like it did. And where that like fear and anxiety and all that nasty feeling got replaced with love, and that was the purest form of love that I remember feeling in a very long time. And I just remember rolling over my side in the fetal position and just giggling and just being like happy and warm and just all encompassing love. And that was the rest of the night for me, was just in that position. I distinctly remember like thinking to myself, like, hey, am I breathing? Like, am I alive? I was like, oh no, we're good. We're still in it. We're still alive, dude. Because I was just in such a calm, peaceful state. And I didn't have any visions, Jesus didn't come and take me to my ancestors or anything like that, but I just felt love. And the next morning when I was talking to the shaman, I was like, hey, that was different. That was pretty cool. And I told him what I'd experienced. And he's like, yeah, that makes sense. There's a duality. And not during my time in the military service, I shut down a lot of my emotions. And this isn't one of those like, yeah, brother, you have to be tough kind of things. But I think it just kind of came with the job, and whether I realized it or not, I just started shutting those things down. And I remember definitely putting on a facade and pretending like, I'm tough or that everything's fine. And, you don't want the guys to lose faith in you as a soldier. So by not allowing myself to feel those emotions, the fear, the anxiety, and all the things that come with that, I was also shutting down the other emotions, which was joy, love, empathy, and that side of the house. So in order to feel the good, I had to feel the bad. I had to reconcile with that bad. And that kind of began my journey with psychedelics. And ultimately, one of the most profound ones was kind of further down the line. I ended up in Tijuana, Mexico, with this all special operations contingent. And we did Ibogaine and 5-MeO DMT. And that's during that experience, I didn't meet Jesus, but like I was enveloped in this like universal type of love, this undeniable love. And it made me realize like, hey man, I didn't start at Harvard yet. Like I was on my way here still. And I was like, hey man, I don't want to kill anyone again. I stand by fuck around and find out. Like play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. But I never want to go out of my way to kill someone or go out of my way to hurt someone ever again. And to make someone feel those things, that fear, that terror, that hate that you can feel towards someone. And like, I remember feeling those, and I just didn't want to make someone feel like that again. Do I still think that there needs to be guys like my old job to go out there and do those things? Absolutely, 100%. I still think there's assholes that need to get put down. I just personally don't want to be the one to do it anymore at this phase of my life. And once I realized that, it put me in the spot where this kind of mantra that kind of lead with love, and the idea of being every interaction I go through, just try and lead with a loving manner, and generally make things positive. And you never know what people are going through, man. And like I may be having a bad day, and there's days where people think I'm bitchy, but I still try and, at least when I can think about it, I try and lead with love and make people feel heard, make people feel seen, and let them know, like, even though maybe a brief interaction, that I do give a shit about them, and I do generally want the best for them. And that's kind of what brought me here to Harvard and to kind of get into neuroscience, in a way.
Yeah. And it's big. And you talk about the duality of you have to feel the good and to feel the bad. You have to be able to submit to that. I think a lot of people who do hallucinogenics, whether you have military experience or otherwise, if you sit there and fight yourself I mean, because at the end of the day, you're not really fighting the drugs, you're fighting yourself. I would argue that. I might be full of shit, but that's my perspective, is that you're fighting yourself and what is within you, and there is a lot to be said for advocating for that type of peace and harmony and love that maybe you've denied yourself or that others have denied you. However, you seek that through meditation, through psychedelics, through those sorts of things. Now, I think in your perspectives, specifically, being a veteran and being someone who is in a educational institution, one of the best ones like in the country, one of the best ones in the world. How have you, right? I mean, I say
I don't know why they have me. It blows my mind as well.
I know, right? You see me looking around. I was like, don't look at him. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But to be able to bring that unique perspective to veterans, to current combat members in the service, and also to be in like a situation with people who are like 18 and you're like, do you remember 9/11? And they're like, what?
Yeah.
Like, the what? You're like, okay, all right. We are same but different.
Mm-hmm.
And so what kind of opportunities has Harvard presented to you that maybe were surprising, that have furthered your experience or your interest or your education in psychedelics, and how that's helped you maybe personally or the people that you know?
Absolutely. The first thing that kind of pops in my head is validity, which is, I think, kind of the name of the game when it comes to psychedelics. Because, up until fairly recently, if you told people you're into psychedelics, like, what are you, get naked in the woods and like hump trees, you fucking weirdo? Like, what is this? Yeah. What are you, from Seattle?
You're from Washington.
So I think it's Harvard's a very interesting place, at least from my experiences so far. And, experiences vary and they're all very subjective. But in my experience with, I'm a sophomore here at the school, or I'm going through my sophomore year, about to be a junior. It's validity and access. Just by saying that I'm from Harvard immediately puts you in a different category. And this isn't like, smell my own farts kind of thing. It's just when people hear that, they're just like, oh, okay. It's like almost like saying you're in special operations, right? Like, oh, you're in the military? Like, yeah, I was in the Rangers, or I was a Navy SEAL, or what have you. They immediately think something else. And in their head, they already categorize you as something else. Like, oh, you're a badass, or oh, you're elite, or oh, you're tough. Same thing with Harvard. When you say like, oh, I go to Harvard, you could do fucking underwater basket weaving or some crazy shit. That you're here at Harvard, they immediately like,
degree ever.
Yeah. It's actually my minor.
Do it. I mean, surfboards.
Yeah, but when you say you're here, they immediately just think you're smart. They immediately just associate with all the positives that are Harvard, and generally what people think when they hear the name. So what's been cool about that is when I do talk about things like psychedelics, excuse me, it does allow me to talk about it not from a place of authority, because by no means am I an authority within the space, not even close to an authority in the space. But just a advocate, a strong advocate. But because of that, they're willing to hear you out. They're willing to give you the time to talk. And I think that's been the number one thing that I've been able to pull from this is, what it got me into psychedelics was my own healing, obviously, through my own mental health journey, all the things that come with that. But I've lost more friends and soldiers to suicide than I have to combat, which is kind of wild, because even when I was in the conventional military, I was still in the infantry. And this is back when the infantry still did shit in the conventional army and still went on deployments and were still active in that aspect. And that's not to dog on the conventional military by any means, but things have slowed down in the later years of the war. If you weren't in special operations, you weren't really doing too much as far as combat was related. They were doing a lot holistically, just as far as the combat stuff was related. So my job was going out and getting bad guys. And the idea that we would fly to the middle of bad guy land, gunfight a dude in the middle of the night, fly home, and everything is pretty kosher, and then you spend 8 months at home and your dude commits suicide. You're like, what the shit, man? You're like, how did we just go through all of that, the gnarliest stuff you can go through, and then you just do that, or you OD on fentanyl, or you have a substance abuse problem, you drink too much and you go ride a bike and you crash drunk, or what have you, and you're like, how are we doing these wild things, and then you come home and get killed like that? So along with why I got into the psychedelics for myself was the idea that I had such a profound experience that if I can bring validity to the idea of psychedelic therapy, formalized, structured psychedelic therapy, not just doing mushrooms at fucking EDC or some crazy shit, or like, if you want to, hey man, that's you, do your journey. That's your vibe. Like I'm never one to judge. But if you're doing psychedelics in a very structured, therapeutic, supervised way, it is a very viable form of alternative therapy. And that's not to discredit traditional forms of therapy or SSRIs or anything like that. Just an alternate form of therapy that is available and is real, and it works very well, and can have some of the most meaningful, spiritual, and life impacting experiences ever. And I think often, like, hey, some of my buddies that committed suicide, if I would have been able to get them to a ceremony, if I was able to take them to Mexico and do this, or take them to do an ayahuasca ceremony and be like, hey buddy, I fucking love you, man. Hey, I think you're a piece of shit, but I love you and I care about you and I want you to be here.
But
because these are vets. You can't be too soft on them. But it's, you want to, if they had been around and I could have gotten to a ceremony, maybe it would have helped. I don't know, right? And by no means do I think psychedelics are a cure-all, but I think it's a very viable alternate form of therapy. And with being here at Harvard, being able to talk about it openly and say these things, it does give me the at least initial validity to have these ideas without people thinking I'm crazy. And then, you back that up with coming from the special operations community, that gives a second layer of validity. And those two things combined are really what I'm trying to utilize to get this message out there, especially a lot of first responders. And I would say the ones, at least from our crew of friends that we have back in Washington, we're a little bit more on the like the liberal side of things. We're a little kind of more free flowy. We're not too hardcore guys. But it takes seeing someone from your community, especially at that level, to be like, oh, okay, maybe that's real. Because there's too many negative things associated with it still. And, give it time and it'll change over time. And the community is doing a lot of great things holistically. But what got me into neuroscience for that was looking at neuroplasticity and how things like psilocybin or other psychedelics can potentially reopen these windows of neuroplasticity. And obviously we know that neurons that fire together wire together, and with neuroplasticity, like that's how you learn. But what's interesting, there it is again. What's interesting is the non-tangibles, right? When you say you learn how to play the piano or you learn how to do something like that or throw a baseball, you can see those neurons are firing together and okay, there's a skill being learned or what have you. And I'm not reading the most up-to-date scientific paper. So if someone here is listening, you're like, this guy's a fucking idiot. If you just read this paper, I apologize. I'm not reading that paper right now.
Still an undergrad, okay?
Yeah, I'm a freaking sophomore, dude.
Email is no. I'm just
hit me on the gram.
Exactly.
But the idea being these untangibles, right? Like, did I learn empathy when I was in this psychedelic state? Like, what did I learn? Like, there were things being taught, and I did take these massive lessons from that. But how do you put very tangible science, this untangible thing? And that's what I'd really like to get into as far as this neuroscience thing goes, and a handful of other things. But we're really looking at the idea of utilizing psychedelic therapy and other alternate forms to help people with trauma and kind of develop this whole encompassing package. I was very fortunate. I got to talk with a research doctor here down at MGH, and he's part of Harvard and all that. And he's researching how extreme environments affect like neurocognitive ability, and how, he's looking at astronauts as well as people who go down deep in subs, as well as extreme altitude from mountain climbing, and PTSD, and how all these different things affect the brain. And if I can get that research, pair that with psychedelic therapy and this idea of alternate adventure therapy, you can really try and attack it from a lot of multiple angles and bring in this kind of all-encompassing package that says like, hey, this is what's going on, this is how we can help you, and this is the data behind it. And you've got to be pretty desperate as especially as an operator. Not when I say operator, I'm not really talking about myself, but as like a real operator, you got to be pretty desperate if you're like sitting down with a therapist, and because there's so many negative things associated with that. But if you come to a dude and you're like, hey man, 100% you have brain trauma, bro. Like if you're in special operations, your noggin's getting rocked all the time. Like that's just part of the game. We jump out of airplanes, we fist fight each other, like we breach doors, we're shooting inside houses, we throwing grenades. Like the job, you're getting traumatic brain injuries, dog, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, at least at this point in the game. I mean, hey, check it out. This is how you heal. This is how you get better. And these are other ways to mitigate risk to yourself and mitigate risk to others. And if you come at them with this holistic, all-encompassing package, and then first thing you're asked, like, who the fuck are you? Because if you don't see my tattoos and you don't know who I am, I just look like some Asian hipster. I'm just like, oh, hey, I wear like cuff Lululemon pants and shit. Like I'm just rolling around. Yeah. Right? I'm just kind of like some
all my other weird toys.
Yeah, like I very much understand the persona I give off. But then you're like, hey man, I did my time here, XYZ, the things I did, as well as I have a neuroscience degree from Harvard, and this is what Harvard research says. You can really help a lot of people, and I, or at least I believe that we'd be able to help a lot of people, and the goal being preventing more dudes from committing suicide. And I think through Harvard, that number one thing is validity, and it allows it one catches people's ears. If I were to come to special operator and be like, hey dog, check it out, this is what's going on. Like, who the fuck are you, bro? Like, oh dude, I'm from Harvard. I have a neuroscience degree. And like, what? And I'm like, yeah, and I was in the Ranger Regiment for a very long time, did XYZ. You can really potentially keep a lot more dudes not when I say in the fight, I mean in the fight of life, a lot longer, and really help a lot of dudes. And again, it's a weird world. Dudes, I mean people. All of them, whatever their things are, I just call it
like the turtle in Finding Nemo. It's like, dude. So it's for all people, for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, yeah, and it's relatability, it's trust. I mean, in business, the best referral you can have for someone to trust your product without ever trying it is when somebody they trust recommends it, right? I mean, it's kind of the way of human nature. Hey, eat this berry. I didn't die when I ate it. You can eat it too, right? I mean, this is really like humanistic type things that we deal with, but because we lived in such a developed society and have all these technologies and things, what you bring to the table is not only experience, but education, but also like, hey, like, and it's weird because we're here virtually, but I'm waving my hands around for our audio listeners, but, it's like, I am real. I made it. I'm here. I fought for survival, and I fought for my life, and I fought for those who are around me, and I'm here to fight for you too. And that's what one of your bigger missions is right now, is fighting for the people who sometimes don't want to fight for themselves or don't know how. Doesn't necessarily mean they don't want to, right? And that's where the 7 Summits really comes into play, right? And which is like, it's cool, and it's cool to watch you grow. It's on like social and sharing that story. And one of the bigger reasons why I wanted you on the podcast and why I wanted you on here is to give people a voice who don't necessarily have a voice right now, and to show them where the light is. So talk to me about the 7 Summits. What are you guys doing? Where did that come from? Where are you going?
Yeah, that's, always a fun story. In this way, it's like, I'm trying to think of how to start it.
We're still practicing.
Yeah, we're trying to frame it. I haven't really perfected the pitch yet. I don't have any officers here. I normally just have an officer tell me what to say, and I just kind of like read off the thing, right? How it started. I'm trying to it kind of came from two different things, right? And where it originally kind of stemmed from, the original stem from it was, here at school, I was very much struggling still, with mental health, and this idea of like, what do I do now? And I'm here, I'm on this new mission, I'm doing neuroscience, I want to study psychedelics, I want to help everybody that I can. But I was still very much like missed the job, missed the community, missed having the boys around me, missed feeling like I had a real purpose, which is funny because I'm at Harvard, right? Like I'm a freshman at Harvard. I have this plan, have this path, I have this thing that I'm doing that I'm very much on this track for, and I still didn't really feel fulfilled, which is a ridiculous thing to say.
No, I mean, it's not though, but we don't want to put that connotation on it, right? Like, because you can have a great path, you can have a great life, you can have all these things, but if you don't feel fulfilled and you don't feel that like within your heart and like within your soul, and that's that driving force, I mean, it can feel, your world can feel very dim.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And during that first year here at school, it was very dim. And I remember just feeling lonely and trying to like really sort through these interesting ideas of like what it means. Because this is where I was going to get at, where like I was reframing my relationship with death. Obviously I'm not dying a warrior's death anymore, but during the time of transition, I talked about it a lot with this guy, like the duality of life and what it means to die a warrior's death, right? And what it means to be a warrior holistically. Um, and it's the idea that you have to do it all, right? A warrior understands everything. He understands life, he understands death, and he understands what it means to be alive. And part of understanding what it means to be alive is appreciating and understanding how beautiful it is to be alive. That comes with art and relationships and understanding all the different things of that. And one of the things I prided myself on during my time in military service and, just kind of who I am as a dude was this idea of like, actively try and work against cowardice in my own life. And, people can look at however they think about cowardice in their own life. But holistically, for what that meant for me at the time was that I will purposely try and run into adversarial things, not like fist fighting people kind of stuff, but things that gave me friction in my own life. I would try and lean into those things because I was like, I'm not a coward, I'm a man, kind of shit. And then I realized that I was purposely running from emotions, specifically at this time of my life. And I was like, I can't pride myself on this idea of like, I'm not a coward when I'm actively running away from a thing in my life. Like I'm very aware, I'm journaling about it. So it kind of forced me to start confronting that and more healing on myself. And not that I'm ever, you're never like completely healed, kind of an ongoing project thing. But when I came out of that and, started my sophomore year here at school, I was in a lot better place mentally. I had a good summer. I got to spend a lot of time with a lot of great people and do some very interesting things. But I was in a better place mentally coming into school this year. And that allowed me to kind of look more at my surroundings and take things in. And as I did that, I realized that here at school, there's a very large isolation, depression, kind of this loneliness thing. It might be to the nature of the competitiveness at the school and kind of how hard these kids have to work to get here, right? Their whole lives are them just grinding away to get here and being hyper competitive. Mm-hmm. And through that, I just kind of noticed that there wasn't a lot of genuine friendships. And don't get me wrong, there are genuine friendships here. And, I'm sure people here are going to have their lifelong friends or whatever. But just casual observations, I would hear things like, oh, I want to meet this guy because I want to network with them. And you're just like, you're fucking 18, bro. You want to network with them? It's like, how about you just be friends, right? And this idea of networking and utilizing people for their value or the value that they could bring into your own life versus just this genuine friendship, maybe really just highlighted this loneliness and depression, which I related to. I was like, holy shit, I know exactly what this is. I know what that feels like. And here at school, we may have decreased over the last like few months or a little bit, but at the time when I started the project, it was like a 3 to 7 month wait list to go see a school therapist, and which is insane because no one hits the oh shit button when
yeah,
we're like, oh, I'm sure down the line I'm gonna need this, right? Yeah. It's like I hit the oh shit button because my world's coming around me like right now, this second, everything's on fire. Oh God. And then they get told to wait 3 to 6 months. And it was very weird to me. Like, what are they supposed to do here? These kids are top of the class, top of the cream, whatever, for all kinds of things in life. And a lot of these are just like hardcore winners. So they don't know how to ask for help. They don't know what to do in the situation. Because I sure didn't, even, at my older age and life experience. So that the kind of plan, the idea of I would like to do something, right? I'd like to do something for a cause. And I didn't know what that was. And it wasn't like, I'm going to climb the world's tallest mountains to do this. It was just like, oh, I'd like to do something here. And, just chewing on it kind of in the back of my mind. Then I met this year, he was a freshman, right? I'm a year ahead of him. He was an incoming freshman, ex-Air Force special operator guy. He was a special reconnaissance dude. Another Asian dude, comb over hair, left arm sleeve, like damn near the same stomach tattoo, same height, same build. Dude, like, dude, straight up just like, yo, what the shit, bro? You know what I mean? Even our Harvard ID pictures, we're both wearing a blue suit, like smiling in the same pose. And I was like, oh my God, this is insane.
Dude, sweet.
Oh, 100%. I was like, we're best friends, like shotgun one beer and 3 high fives later. Amazing, amazing human. And we were like fire and gasoline, man. And we were working out together, spending a lot of time together, talking, trying to figure out how we could change the world kind of thing. And we're coming up on our winter break this sophomore year. And I was like, hey, man, do you want to climb Kilimanjaro? And he's like, fuck it, dude, send it live. We're like, all right, cool, let's start figuring this out, right? It's kind of our personality. Like, all right, let's just figure it out. We're gonna figure out how to do this. So as we started working on our idea to climb Kilimanjaro, like, hey, like, we're kind of in an interesting position here at school. This is one of the world's tallest mountains. Like, why don't we try and do this for a cause? Like, what do we really care about? So we would sit down and just write things out and figure out like what really define things that we care about. And the two things we really settled on was one, the idea of student mental health and bringing this awareness to student mental health. And this may be ignorance on my part, but I just remember being in the military, my first deployment, 9 months, damn near no running water, damn near no electricity, like hand washing our clothes, getting shot at all the time. And then my deployments after that, getting in these super intense gunfights, doing the job. And I remember thinking like, college kids are pussies, dude. Right? Like I had this very downcast, like, oh, you got to study. Oh, like I just watched a dude get fucking vaporized. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, I had this very negative, judgmental view of college students. And here I am, a college student, like going through the shit, dude, like not having a good time and be like, all right, I was wrong. Like maybe I'm an asshole. Right. And it dawned a lot of reality on me that, hey man, like this is hard. Like, I wasn't giving it the credit it was due. And I wanted to bring attention to that. And I think it's very important to realize that, like, yes, we are at Harvard, we are at a very good school and amazing amenities and all the good things that come with it. But like mental health is still a massive issue within these kids, and they're 18 years old doing drugs, talking about suicide, and like these terrible, terrible things still happen even in this top echelon of schools.
Totally.
So that's something that, we really cared about, and was like, hey man, like if you can figure out how to deal with mental health and get the help you need at this age, well, then the rest of your life, when these things pop up again, you'll have the tools to take care of that, right? And the second thing we really cared about was this idea of veteran education, and not like, teaching our dumb friends how to read and write, but the idea, because God knows we need it. I mean, again, you met me 4 years ago, man. Like right, like,
my name is here. I can't spell it.
Yeah, right. Like whatever it says on my shirt, right? But the idea of being exposure, and I think it's very important for veterans to get exposure to the outside community. One of the things that makes the veteran community so amazing, and one of the reasons I love it, is that it brings in people from all over the world, all over America. You have kids from multi-million-dollar families and a kid who damn near grew up in a trash can, sitting together, sharing a piece of pizza, being like, this party sucks, right? And they're just there, right? And they got to deal with it. And it forces you to interact with these people and deal with these ideas and all these different kinds of things that come up. I'm just thinking about some of these fucking things. Some of them ridiculous, right? Like, sorry.
It's okay.
It's so fun, dude. Idiots, just idiots. Like, I'm sorry. I'm not gonna get this on my head. This is a ridiculous story.
You can share whatever you want. I mean,
we were in basic training one time, and it was like a Sunday, and we had to like clean all our bait. We had to clean our barracks and all that stuff. And our drill sergeant gave us like 5 hours. We cleaned it up pretty fast, got everything done. And we're like, what do we do? There's no TV. There's, this is back when it was hard. We didn't have our cell phones or anything like that. And for some reason, just you get 100 dudes together and we start saying dumb stuff. And someone's like, dude, I could jack off faster than you ever could. Right. And this, obviously we're all trying to be winners. Like, no, dude, I could do it faster than you. And it became like a thing. And now we're all just screaming at each other, being idiots. And it ended up becoming this thing where we try to have dudes race in the urinals to see who could do it faster, pretty much. And we ended up busting out. We had their trench coats, we had our gas masks on, we had like a judging panel, we had referees, and we had like 4 or 5 dudes up there, however many urinals that we thought, like saying that they could do it the fastest. And like we like wrote out rules and stuff. And it's so like we just got fully enveloped in this. And then like it's this thing's going on. These dudes are racing, right? Like, hey, exercise, you got to start like this. So it kicks off. They're racing. We're cheering on like idiots. And these dudes they're standing like butt naked, right? And then the judges have trench coats, just their underwear. Looks like a weird Mad Max kind of adult movie. And the drill sergeant comes in because all he hears is like people screaming. So he comes in. He's like, "What the fuck is going on here?" And everybody's just like, "Ah!" Even the dudes who are doing it are like, "Ah!" And I remember our drill sergeants be like, "What the shit?" And like, you know what? I don't fucking care, man. Outside, 5 minutes, everybody now. And we're just like, "Oh, Roger that." And we have to go run, throw our uniforms, and get outside.
Man.
Yeah, sorry, it's just like.
Now you guys know I had sex toys all over his desk.
Yeah, that's my origin story.
Hey, it's just you.
Yeah, but but just like these wild humans. Dang on, sorry, hold on, I gotta get my thoughts again. But yeah, so there's just this very interesting group of people that get brought in from all walks of life together in this pot. But the problem with that is we're in the military. And after we get out of the military, you're very much accustomed to that way of thinking, that way of living, that way of speech, understanding, the rules to that game and the separate society within America that abides by its own rules. Like where I was. Say again?
That's a big statement. That's a good way to say that. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Right. I mean, it's, I would assume you go in there and you'll have your unique talents and those are magnified and not the differences, right? Like together you are better. And then you come out into society, we have a sticker. It's not in here. We have a sticker and it's like, geez. United we stand about. Anyways, long story short, you come. That's a bunch of bullshit. Cut that out. No, I'm just kidding. But I guess what I'm getting at is I'm all like soapboxed is that you get out into society and it's like everybody shits on everybody and everyone's like, "Fuck you, man! Like you're different. I don't care about your strengths. I'm this and I'm better than you and I'm that." And like, anyways, that's my soapbox. But it's different, And in a lot of those conversations, it's all of a sudden like you're lesser than. And you're like, I literally fought for the ground that you're standing on for you to sit in your white little office with your microphone up your face. And then it's just like, you're going to be an asshole to me? Like, I don't know.
No. It's just, the fun thing about the military is, or where I was specifically, was we knew that we had each other's back. There's dudes in there that hate me to this day, think I'm a piece of shit, think I'm a terrible Ranger, and the worst example of a Ranger and that could ever be. And to them, they're probably right in their own ways. But yet at the same time, if they were ever in trouble, like real trouble, I'd run into a burning building for them, and I'm sure they do the same for me. And there's dudes that I absolutely despise, and like, dude, I would not help them out from a puddle. But like, if like something bad was going down, like I would be there within an instant without even thinking about it, right? Mm-hmm. And because there's that kind of unspoken thing, shitting on a dude because he's Mexican or shitting on me because I'm Asian is just like, okay, right? It just kind of is what it is. And they understand that there's no real malice. And even if there is some malice, they still have your back at the end of the day, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what helps forge that kind of the bond between everybody there and understanding that like, you understand what people are capable of and the people around you are capable of and where they stand, but also that they will use those capabilities to come get you if absolutely needed. So getting out or leaving that bubble is very hard for a lot of veterans, and they will stay within that bubble because it's safe and it's comfortable and they know the rules. And getting outside of that is hard, and getting exposed, especially just raw exposure into the working world, it's absolutely terrible. Like, dude, if you were like a first sergeant or like a platoon sergeant in the military, and then especially within the combat arms environment, and you go out and you're like fucking manager at Baskin Robbins, like, dude, you're probably gonna hate your life. And if someone is doing that, good on them, and I'm sure they're thriving. But like, I would not have done well there. I wouldn't have thrived, and I would have been in a very, very bad spot. And it happens all of the time. And that's why I'm harping on this thing of like, veterans, I think, really should go to college if they have the ability to after they get out of military services. It gives them a buffer of time, right? It allows them at least 4 years to school, to decompress, to get exposure to those around them in a relatively safe environment. And one of the things I remember hearing a lot in the military was like, these fucking college kids in their safe spaces, and there's like, you know, all the stuff that comes with that. But I think it's important to have that safe space, right? The military for us was a safe space, and getting out of the military and going directly in the working world, if you haven't adjusted well or don't have a community around you, is very, very hard to do. So by going to college, it allows you to decompress. It allows you to gain an additional skill, potentially get into something you really give a shit about and research that and learn about that, as well as you get paid. I mean, like we still get money for going to college. So you get a free education, you learn something, you get exposure to all people from all kinds of different walks of life that aren't within this context of like, hey, let's go shoot some dude in the face. And I think it's very, very important and would help a lot of people transition. When I came here to Harvard, one of my buddies sent me a text and said, "Hey, bud, good luck in enemy territory." You know, and that was our perspective on things like this.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's important to get out here, and surprised it's not enemy territory. If anything, it's pretty awesome territory. And I've been able to, you know, like the dude I spend the most time with is a 19-year-old fucking Honduran kid. He's an immigrant from Honduras, and I spend probably 6 to 7 hours a day with him. Right? I'm 30 years old. It's just weird. It's just weird. And one of my other really good buds here is a 26-year-old ex-professional ballet dancer. Dude,
Wow.
if I told you 4 years ago, like old school freaking Ragnar Iggy, like, yeah, dude, one of my best buds here is gonna be a 19-year-old Honduran and a ballet dancer, you're gonna be like, right?
So what did you take today?
Yeah. Dude, is that what you're smoking? Give me some. You know? Absolutely. And you know, I think that's very important. So how that all kind of very roundabout way gets back to the mountain climbing stuff is these are the things that Kevin and I identified, or my buddy and I identified as being things we really give a shit about. And if, you know, obviously between his skill set and my skill set, we very much believe that we could like obviously summit Kilimanjaro. And through him and I talking and talking about these things, we're like, dude, why don't we just try and send it for all 7? You know, like we'll be the first actively enrolled Harvard undergraduates in the history of the school to ever summit the 7 summits while being enrolled. And the idea being that massive action inspires little action. We don't expect people to go out summit mountains after this, but we expect them to see us and be like, hey, I know these guys. They're, you know, they're different, a little weird. Well, I don't know why they have so many matching tattoos, but like they're pretty normal dudes holistically. And if they can do that while being full-time college students, you know, I'm doing neuroscience, and it's a relatively tough course load, and still go do these things, well, then I should be able to have the time or have the means and ability to go on a walk along the river here, or we have the Charles River, or go run around a pond here, or do something, get with a friend, get active, get outside and take control of that part of your mental health. And that's not to disregard depression or anxiety or loneliness not being actively, like, you know, those are real conditions, and it's not to discredit those things. But by getting with friends and getting outside, getting moving and going on these small adventures and pushing yourself in that way, it does give you some tools, and it will give you the confidence to go out and do these things and ultimately take more control of your own personal and mental health, and hopefully bring some veterans into college while doing this thing. I do have to say, though, unfortunately, Kevin hurt his knee training for this he had an old Halo accident back in the day when he was in the Air Force. So he ended up having to drop out. So now I'm not saying when I say by myself, I'm not climbing these mountains by myself, but as far as doing this project from the school, I'm by myself. But I've been very fortunate to get connected with people like Veterans Adventure Group and other organizations that are helping me get along and take down some of these mountains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a, you know, an exemplary way to persevere, right? Like, I mean, like, and that sounds shitty because it's stupid. It sounds like Harvard, and I am not qualified for Harvard. But I mean, if we really want to get all emotional about it, I mean, it's kind of like going to war and not coming home with everyone, right? But you still stand for what they stood for. You still stand as that example, and you carry that responsibility on your shoulders, right? And that's why you keep going. And that's like, you know, you said the big action inspires little action. One of the biggest things about adventure is the human experience, right? And this connectivity with the world around us that's not synthetic. You don't have to do mushrooms to experience that, you guys. Like, you don't have to be like, yeah, I'm going to send it in ayahuasca and DMT and do those sorts of things if you don't want to. those are there, they're neat. Maybe start with an edible. But you know, like the amount of adventure that is out there in life, whether it's, driving to your work, driving to your desk job that you've been to for 25 years every single day, loyally, and looking at the color of the trees. It's having a new conversation. It's being vulnerable. It's meeting someone while you're ripping shots and all of a sudden talk about shooting people in the face and then being like, hey, I think I kind of connect with this person. He seems like there's a lot to him that resonates with me. I think we're going to be buds for a long time. Right. And that's where this kind of all encompassing, like if you can reframe your cognition, if you can reframe your approach, whether you're in the shittiest of shit in your life or you're just like crushing and you're in the bougie little section of it, we all experience the same emotions. We all experience the same ups and downs as far as what happens in our brain and what happens in our heart. And if you can find ways to connect and like Nick said, find validity within the duality of your experiences in your life. What you may have done in the past may not serve you now, and what you may have to do to move forward may be something you've never done. And there shouldn't be shame in that. And if there's anything that Nick can tell you, it's don't be afraid to be a beginner. Don't be afraid to be humbled in the face of life, in the face of others. I mean, the guy is telling you, you've heard his accolades. I mean, he laid on the ground and damn near peed himself about Coke cans. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, we all have our shit that's embarrassing. We all have our shit like we're not super stoked to, talk about, and our buddies are going to give us shit about. But that's life, and this is life, and this is what it's worth fighting for, and really finding like what brings you fulfillment, what makes your clock or your, air quotes, your heart tick about it. And it's okay if it's something that is emotional, because we all have that. You're not lesser than, you're not greater than, you're not anything better than. We're in this race together, and none of us are getting out, and some of us leave sooner, right? And it's just kind of like, how do you maximize that time that you're here, and how do you share your story, and how do you walk? You walk where you're proud, and you walk where you are able to lend that hand and look at someone and hate their guts, but say, if shit happened, I would get you back. Or are you walking around saying like, hey, F everyone, you don't actually exist to me. I exist, you don't. You stay over there, I'm going to stay over here, right? And that's, I mean, a lot of pretty much what I've gotten from talking to you is that it's just this desire to survive, but to enjoy the process along the way, right?
Absolutely. No, I think one of the running quotes in my life is like, if you ain't having fun, you're doing it wrong, man. Like kind of alluding like before in the military, we could do these gnarly things like shit's hitting the fan around us, and you can make a joke. You can find.
You can throw on a Chewbacca mask.
Yeah, you can throw on a Chewbacca mask. Well, shit's in the fan everywhere, right? Like, life's serious. Like, don't get me wrong, life's serious and super hard and super gnarly, and not everyone has the same starting point. But at the same time, like, it's beautiful, and there is so much beauty in this thing. And I think part of it is just, like you said, being vulnerable, man. Like, I think it's so important. It's so hard to do. Like, I would always say, like, I pride myself on being a relatively resilient fella. And there's a moment this semester where I broke down under a table in the library, like next door to me, and I cried under a table for like fucking 15 minutes, and was just like, and like I punched the floor and was like, all right, dude, get back to work. Right? Like, got it out, get back to work. And it's like, how did I get brought to my knees to cry under a table at 30 years old, having done the things that I've done? Like, do I rescue, this is like a 2 mile, like, dude, I've like ran into a house fire and rescued strangers, right? Like literally carried people out of a house fire before. And like, oh, that was cool. Got chicken wings and did my thing, right? Like, oh, that was a weird Tuesday, right? And then, I'm here and you're like, dude, I have a test coming up. I have these things going on. Like, oh my God. And then I break down crying under a table. It's just, it's wild. Life's wild. But at the same time, I think there's beauty in that. And I think there's this beauty in being vulnerable and being able to like understand it and understand that it's okay. Give yourself the grace to experience these things. And I think that's a spot where a lot of dudes from the communities, really, or honestly, a lot of men holistically, I think, struggle with the idea of having that weakness and being able to be like, oh shit, man, that sucked, right? And then crying it out, doing what you got to do, but then also getting back on the horse and working in it. And I think that's true perseverance. And again, this isn't like to smell my own fart kind of thing, but I think that
It's not from here. Sorry.
it's protein, man. I know what you want from me. And again, this is examples that have been brought to me. This isn't anything novel that I've come up with. This has all been taught to me and shown to me by really, really amazing dudes. But that, I think it's just important. I think it's so important to allow yourself to feel those things and allow yourself to have the grace to go through those hardships, go through those lows, and then be like, all right, man, let's work, and then get back on it. And I think that's what allows you to be efficient.
Well, how much better is it to deal with it in 15 minutes than like 4 years from now? Right. Like, so that's like we'll get in there, not going there. But, my recent thing is like, I've got to, not be all yin and can't be all yang. And I have to, if I cry super duper hard for 5 minutes and then don't cry again for a while, that's so much better than this like build up. And the next thing I know, the next 4 hours of my afternoon is absolute garbage, because it's just cried through it. Like, there's you said it yourself, and it's just, you have to feel the good, you have to feel the bad, you have to feel the light. The sun and the moon do the same thing, like they're with respect to each other, and that's like a woo-woo, but there's a lot of amazing things from it that you have brought forth that I'm so grateful for you to be on the show. So grateful for our listeners. I hope you guys have taken so much from this and from Nick. And if you, really connected with this episode, connected with some of these things, want to expand on them, want to continue to have that conversation with Nick, I want you to reach out to him. His handle is _flying Hawaiian. His last name is spelled IGE, so Iggy. And then what are some of the other ways so people can follow you? You're going to continue with the 7 summits. You're going to continue documenting it. You're doing a really good job so far. But is Instagram the best way to follow you there?
Yeah, absolutely. For right now, all I have is the Instagram. We're looking to do a YouTube thing or something like that. And I personally, still don't really trust TikTok, but that's another bridge to cross at another time. But yeah, and then on my Instagram, I have the links there. And if you want to support and you really support our mission here, then you can donate via GoFundMe on the links on my Instagram page, which would be greatly appreciated by any means. Yeah, we need help in all aspects, exposure, financial, what have you. If you guys can lend a hand or just curious, want to hear more about psychedelics, about transitioning, any of that stuff, please just reach out, give me a holler.
Yeah. And another thing you guys can do too, if there's anyone out there sharing your story, and it really is important to share your story, because you never know, one person is one but one person, you could change their whole life. So, if you guys are inspired by Nick and you are starting to share your story, tag him so that he can kind of follow along on your journey. We will also, for our audio listeners, navigate to the Swolverine YouTube. We will link the GoFundMe's and Iggy's information there. And is there kind of any last, you gave us so many good nuggets of information. This might be a big ask, but what do you think kind of is the biggest ask you want to kind of put out there for people, whether they're advocating for yourself, advocating, and I guess this could be a couple of things, advocating for you and what you're doing, taking charge of their health. What's your question that you pose to the people listening and watching about taking action on their mental health in their life?
I think the big thing would be, make sure you give yourself grace. Give yourself the grace, but also, and I apologize for the frank language, don't be a fucking pussy either. Right? Give yourself the grace to fall, give yourself the grace to stumble and be down and mess up. But the only way to keep going is to fucking keep going. And you need to get up and you dust your shit off and you get back on that horse and you keep riding. So give yourself the grace, allow yourself to have the lows, the bad things, but don't be a fucking pussy and get back to work. Because I think, action cures anxiety. And then lead with love, man. Do everything and try and lead with love. Love yourself, love those around you, and good things will come.
Hell yeah. Well, you guys heard it first here on the Swole Friends podcast with Nick Iggy. Make sure to give him a follow at the flying Hawaiian. I said that wrong. So at the _flying Hawaiian. Make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. We get to sit down with amazing people that we have come across in time, whether it's at a party ripping shots or it's out on the competition floor. Being in this industry is such a gift and a blessing. We appreciate everyone out there listening and watching. Nick, we'll catch you next time, and thank you.
Absolutely.